So as a film lover, and I guess with this YouTube channel, a film critic, it's obvious that I have seen every single film in existence. Wait, that's how it works, right? However, there has been one franchise that has managed to avoid me, that has managed to slip through my fingers, I guess you could say. So today, I'll be watching every single Twilight movie in 24 hours. God help me. Hello everybody, welcome back to Bring Your Own Popcorn. So, yes, as I said, today I will be watching and reviewing every Twilight film. But I'm not just watching these over a few days, or even a few weeks. No. I will be watching all 5 installments into this franchise in 24 hours. So this is a series that I've been wanting to do in this channel for a while. I thought it'd be really fun. But now that I've woke up at 8 AM to start watching the Twilight films, I'm not entirely sure this has been a great idea. But hey ho, we're doing it now. So without further ado, let's get this series kicked off with Twilight. I should have mentioned that I know literally nothing about this franchise. The only thing I know is it's meant to be incredibly cringy, and it's about vampires, and Robert Pattinson's in it. So is her that played Princess Diana, Kristen Stewart. So yeah, I don't know much about the franchise, but I thought it would be a really funny one to kick this series off with, because I really don't want to watch these movies. Okay, so it's 9:04 AM. And I'm just about to start watching Twilight. As you can see, I've got it loaded up here, ready to go. So I'm about to hit play, and you'll hear my thoughts after I'm done with the first film in this 5-film franchise. Oh, I'm in for a long day. Here we go.
You're faster than the others, but not stronger. I'm strong enough to kill you. You are my life now.
Okay, so I just got done with Twilight. It is now 11 AM. Just got done with the movie. And yeah, it was actually a pretty solid film. I can't believe I'm saying this. I was expecting to hate this movie. Just because everyone says it's cringy dialogue, it's just an overall, like, soppy teen romance movie. I was expecting to not like this. But the story actually surprisingly got me hooked. It is quite a simple story. It is your just typical romance. But the chemistry between the characters were so good, especially between Bella and Edward, that I was really enjoying the story. Don't get me wrong, the dialogue is a bit meh. It can be a bit cringy in places, but it wasn't as bad as everyone lets on, I don't think. Yeah, I actually could really get behind this story. And everyone seems to say the acting's bad in this one. The acting wasn't terrible at all. It wasn't great. But it wasn't terrible. I thought Robert Pattinson actually gave a pretty decent performance in this. So did Kristen Stewart. Except for the fact that she, after everything she says, she feels the need to bite her lip aggressively, which is really weird.
First, Edward was a vampire.
I don't know why she's doing that in this movie, but yeah, all the performances were fairly decent in this one. The only performance I didn't really like, and only character I didn't really like, was the villain. I can't remember his name because he was that forgettable. There was like a group of 3 villains in this one, but they only really focus on one towards the end, and even at that, he's so underdeveloped, it's unreal. So yeah, just not a great villain at all. The direction is okay here. I know it's Catherine Hardwicke. It's alright direction, it's quite dull and moody, almost emo-ish direction, which I don't hate, but the effects aren't great in this one. The CGI looks pretty bad and the makeup looks terrible in this movie. Yeah, the direction is okay from like a cinematography standpoint, but when you get into CGI, special effects, makeup, that type of stuff, it's just it's not there at all. It should have been so much better. I can't see myself rewatching this anytime soon, but I had a pretty decent time with it. So let's not waste any time and crack on with the next one, which is Twilight. I don't even know the name of the next one. Twilight New Moon, it's called, New Moon. So without further ado, let's crack on and watch New Moon. Okay, so I just got done with Twilight New Moon. This one was pretty bad. It was just a complete rip-off of the first Twilight film, done worse. The dialogue was cringier, the characters were less interesting. It was just the first film done poorer. The story is incredibly predictable because I literally just watched the exact same stuff play out an hour earlier, except an hour earlier it was done a lot better. The dialogue is just terrible, it's got a really poor script behind it and it is just incredibly cringy in places. I will say the film picks up slightly towards the end when they go to Italy. It becomes slightly interesting and we get a decent climax. Decent. Not good. But yeah, it's not a great story at all and it's got a really poor script behind it. The performances were okay in this one. Robert Pattinson was pretty good for the scenes he was in. He is pretty much not in this film at all. He's in the start and he's in the end and scattered throughout the middle. And when he is in it, he is fairly decent, but he's hardly in this one. Kristen Stewart is just kind of sleepwalking through this entire film, not really caring how she comes across on screen, not really giving a crap, if I'm honest, I don't think. She's just playing the same old Bella Swan. She's not really thinking about how her dialogue should read. She's just reading it. Taylor Lautner gives a terrible performance as Jacob. It's just bad and cringy and yeah, he's not good in this film at all. In terms of the supporting cast, there are some decent performances scattered in there. The girl playing Alice gives a pretty good performance in this one, but nothing to write home about. I will say Michael Sheen, you are the saving grace of this movie. For the little time he's in it, at the end, he is an absolute joy to watch on screen and actually gives us a pretty good villain, which is a nice redeeming factor about this film. But yeah, a decent cast, nothing incredible, but nothing too bad either. The direction is just outright bad here. At least Catherine Hardwicke chose a style and went with it. In this one, the style is just bland. That's the definition of this direction, is bland. The cinematography is uninspired and boring, and somehow the effects have gotten worse from the first one. The CGI genuinely looks atrocious, laughably bad, especially when Edward Cullen's like not a ghost, but like a vision almost. That looks horrendous. It looks terrible. I will say there is some decent on-location shooting when they go to Italy again at the end of the film, but again, it's nothing great. Yeah, pretty poor direction here. If I could sum New Moon up in one word, I would use the word repetitive. It is literally just the exact same thing I watched in the first Twilight film, but with a poorer script and poorer direction. So yeah, that is New Moon, and we are going to crack straight on, even though I wasn't a fan of this one. We're gonna continue. I'm gonna stick to my word, and we are going to watch the next one called Eclipse, Twilight Eclipse. So here we go.
I'll protect you, no matter what.
You don't know what you're getting yourself into.
I'm gonna fight for you until your heart stops beating.
So it just turned 4 p.m. and I just got finished with Twilight Eclipse. And honestly, this was actually a bit of a return to form for the franchise. And it's pretty much on par with the first one for me, if not slightly worse, but not by much. The story is actually pretty enthralling here. I quite liked how it delved into some of the Cullens' backstories, and honestly, they were some of my favourite scenes in the entire franchise. The sense you get of family through this film is really, really good, and it's really well represented. How you see the Cullens really accept Bella as one of their own and will stop at nothing to protect her. It's really, really a good representation of family. It's also the most action-packed one so far, and I actually thought the action was pretty good. It wasn't anything great, but it was pretty fun to watch. I thought this film dealt with Edward and Bella's relationship pretty well. One of the things that did annoy me though is how much Bella is changing her mind between Jacob and Edward. 1 minute she's head over heels in love with Jacob, the next it's Edward, back and forth. It gets really, really annoying by the end. The story still isn't anything mind-blowing, and the dialogue is fairly cringy in places. There's literally a scene where Jacob turns to Edward and says the words, "You know I'm hotter than you."
And let's face it, I am hotter than you.
Little things like that just are so incredibly cringy. But the story is not bad. Not bad at all. It is a fairly fun little story. The performances are fairly good here again. Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart it's a bit of a return to form from them, from the previous one, especially Kristen Stewart, and they have that natural chemistry again that I've not seen since the first one, and it was pretty much vacant from New Moon. The whole supporting cast are given a little bit more to do here, which is nice to see, and therefore you get to see their characters fleshed out a bit more, and you get better performances because of that. Taylor Lautner is still pretty bad, and every single line that he delivers actually made me cringe a little bit. But he isn't as bad here as he is in New Moon. In New Moon he's flat out terrible. In this one he's just bad. I thought Bryce Dallas Howard did a pretty decent job as the villain for the little time that she's actually in the movie. She did actually do a pretty decent job. The direction was a massive improvement over the previous 2 films, in my opinion. The cinematography was pretty damn good, and the action scenes were filmed very, very well. And the CGI looked actually good. Actually good CGI. It was a wee bit rocky in places, especially with the wolves and stuff, but you can tell this one had a bigger budget because the CGI just looks vastly better compared to the previous 2 films. So overall, Eclipse was actually a fairly decent film, and it's pretty much on par with the first one for me, if not slightly worse. So even though I did fairly enjoy this one, there was nothing worse that I could think of than watching another 2 Twilight films with my afternoon. I'm already starting to feel a bit tired after watching 3, but I'm a man of my word, so we're going to do the other 2. I'm going to pause for a little bit, get a little break, go get some popcorn because I think I'm going to need it if I'm going to get through another 2 Twilight films. And then we will crack on with, what's the next one? Breaking Dawn Part 1. So let's do it. Okay, so I just got done with Breaking Dawn Part 1, and sadly this one was a bit of a slog to get through. This one was frankly just quite boring. Wasn't a big fan of this one. Not a lot happens, and what does happen is blatantly uninteresting. I didn't have a great time watching this one. As it is part 1 of like 2 parts, it's basically a movie split in 2. All you get in this one is a lot of the setup, a bit like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. All you get is the setup really, which is not interesting if you don't get the payoff in that film. It kind of lacks a bit of substance. Nothing is outright bad about the film, I would say. It's not terrible, but it's just not interesting at all. I couldn't care less what was going on in this movie. I will say the direction was fairly decent. There was some really, really odd shots where the CGI just didn't look good at all. Like that shot of the baby, like what was going on there? And the acting was alright. It wasn't bad. I'd stepped down from the previous films, but it wasn't as bad as the acting in New Moon, I have to say. I'm still not a massive fan of Taylor Lautner's performance, and a lot of the people playing his kind of clan, his cult, I guess you could say, I don't know what the right word for them is, a lot of them gave pretty bad performances, but overall, from Robert Pattinson, Kristen Stewart, and the whole Cullen clan, the performances were fairly decent. I just sadly was quite bored with a lot of this movie. I can't say it any plainer. This one just bored me to tears. It wasn't as bad as New Moon, in my opinion, but it was very, very close to it. And now we're going to do one last push, even though I really, 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 really can't be bothered watching another Twilight movie. We're going to do it. One last push. We can do it. Breaking Dawn Part 2. Here we go. Oh. And we're done. Oh, what a day it's been. I am honestly so glad that I will never have to watch another Twilight movie in my life. So that is a wrap. I have officially watched every single Twilight film, finishing it off with Breaking Dawn Part 2. And I was quite mixed on this one, I'm not gonna lie. There were things that I did really like about this one, but sadly there were things that I also really didn't like about this one. I thought that they would have kept all the payoff to this movie, and to be honest, they did, but a lot of it I just found quite boring. I don't know if that's because I watched 10 hours of Twilight today and it's kind of warped my mind, but yeah, I found this one rather boring until the last act, and then in the last act there's a twist that happens, and the twist ruins that whole ending for me. The film kind of leads to no big payoff. It kind of leads to nothing at the end of the day, and I wasn't a big fan of that. But still, it wasn't a terrible story, and when the action does happen, the action is a lot of fun. I thought the dialogue was actually fairly well written in this one, and there were a load of new interesting characters introduced in this one, even though I can't remember much about them. It was still cool having new interesting characters brought in for the final film. As for the physical ending, I did actually really like it. I was very happy with it. I enjoy that Edward and Bella got their happy ending, and I actually really liked the the title sequence over the end, it reminded me a bit of, well, this came first, I guess, so Endgame kind of reminds me a bit of this, but it gave me big Endgame vibes, so that was cool. In terms of acting and stuff, I actually will give this one a thumbs up. Again, there were a lot of good actors in this film. Michael Sheen is just incredible. He plays a fantastic villain. He's so over the top. There's actually this one bit where he's like, I think he's talking to the daughter and he just kind of does this weird laugh. He just kind of goes, ha 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 ha, like that. It's so awesome. But in terms of the cast, Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, the whole Cullen family, they all give good performances. And Rami Malek's in this one, and he gives a pretty good performance because he's a great actor. So there's no outstanding performances except for Michael Sheen, but there's no bad performances either. In terms of direction, however, this one was pretty poor. I thought the effects were okay in places and such a mess in other places. What is it with this CGI baby / child? Because I was like, okay, they're CGIing the baby. I can maybe see why they're doing that. It's hard to get a baby to act sometimes. But then they could have just hired a child actor to play the wee girl. But instead, they CGI a child. It looks horrific. So we've ended on a rather mixed note. This is probably the most average-like film out of them all. So there we have it. I have officially finished the Twilight saga in one day. It is now approaching 9 PM at night, so it has been a hefty shift I've put in. I have watched 10 hours of Twilight and my brain wants to go to sleep. But before I finish this video, I'm going to really quickly rank these movies. Sorry, I can't speak apparently. As I said, my mind's completely gone to sleep. So coming in at last place, we have Twilight New Moon. This sequel is just a complete rip-off of the first film, done a lot worse, substituting the vampires for werewolves. There's cringy dialogue, there's poor direction, the CGI looks terrible, and overall it's just not a really fun time. It does pick up a little bit towards the end when we get Michael Sheen and they go to Italy, but overall this is probably the most forgettable and lamest Twilight movie. I would give New Moon a 4 out of 10. Coming in next, we have Breaking Dawn Part 1. This is probably the most boring Twilight movie because it does literally nothing. The whole plot is Bella's now pregnant and that is it. It starts off okay with the wedding, but it just gets completely naff towards the end. It is boring, the story is extremely tedious, the acting is pretty bland for the most part. We don't have Michael Sheen in this one, so the acting's pretty bland. Taylor Lautner's Jacob just comes across as the most annoying character throughout the full of this. Yeah, it's just not a great film. I would give Breaking Dawn Part 1 a 4 out of 10. And what is it with that CGI baby? Coming in next, we have Breaking Dawn Part 2. This is a pretty decent conclusion to the whole story, but the story is pretty boring for the most part. It introduces a few new interesting characters into the mix, and Michael Sheen is back, woohoo, who gives a fantastic performance, but the whole film seems to build and build and build, and when you think you're getting a payoff, the twist happens, and I'm not a fan of that twist because it literally leaves you feeling a bit empty on the inside, as this full movie has built to absolutely nothing. But the physical ending of the film is good. It's nice to see Bella and Edward happy. And yeah, it's just a pretty average movie. I would give Breaking Dawn Part 2 a 5 out of 10. Coming in at runner-up, we have Twilight Eclipse. The story was actually fairly decent in this one, and definitely the best since the original. I love how the vampires team up with the werewolves in this one to stop this kind of vampire cult coming after them and coming after Bella. It is really, really cool. The direction is actually pretty decent in this one. The CGI looks really good for the most part. You can tell this one's had a bit of a budget increase. The dialogue, while still tedious, isn't as noticeable as in the other films. And the performances are actually okay in this one. And the climax to this one is pretty fun. It's probably the best action out of the entire Twilight franchise. I will say low points of this movie is definitely the jumping between Edward and Jacob for Bella. 1 minute she's in love with Edward, 1 minute she's in love with Jacob. She can't make up her mind. It's rather tedious and brings the movie down a lot. Overall, I would give Twilight Eclipse a 6 out of 10. And coming in at first place, we have Twilight, the original, the one that started it all. I was expecting to hate this and actually came away from it thinking this is a pretty solid movie. I could really actually get behind this love story, and it wasn't as cringy or like teen soppy as much as I thought it would be. The dialogue is pretty meh, especially like Edward saying to Bella, something about a spider monkey, I can't even remember.
You better hold on tight, spider monkey.
But there's little bits that make you cringe, but it wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. The performances in this one are actually pretty good. Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart are actually giving good performances here in my opinion. I still think in Eclipse they probably peak for their performances. But yeah, they do give good performances here. I would say the whole cast give decent performances. I will say the villain gives a terrible performance. It's such an underwhelming villain. And the film really has no climax, or at least not an exciting one. But overall, this is a pretty decent film. I would give the original Twilight a 6 out of 10. So there we go. We have watched every single Twilight movie. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It has actually been pretty fun making it. I know I've been saying, oh, I've been in pain watching this one. It has been a long day, I will say that. But it was pretty fun making it. And I hope to do more of these in the future. So if you can think of any franchises that you want me to cover in this series, just pop them down in the comments below. Please bear in mind that these franchises need to be accomplishable in one sitting, so in 24 hours. So for example, don't bother putting Star Wars down there or anything like that because it's just not able to be done. But yeah guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, all that jazz, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.